So you're lucky, and I think I'm the luckiest of all as far as that goes. As he mentioned, my name is Dave Udelf, and my information is right up here in case anybody wants to get a hold of me. I think the information is also in the handout. I want to go over a little bit, first off, what we're going to be doing tonight, okay? I do have a presentation, and Kevin, you can flip to the next slide. Like to use a little bit of humor. This obviously is a parent presentation, but what I want to do tonight is want to go over a little bit about what we're going to cover tonight, okay? One of the things we're going to cover is me, just a little bit of background about me, because after all, you should know what your kids are getting themselves into with me. Then I'm going to go over a little bit about what is sports psychology, or really, I think, what people really need clarified, what sports psychology is not, because a lot of people have a misconception about it. So I want to clear that up a little bit. Then I want to talk about my role with Force Sports, and so you have a little bit of an understanding of what I'll be doing. And then giving the main part of the presentation, which, as you can see, and if you flip the slide again, back over to boys will be men, girls will be women, raising responsible, mentally tough, resilient student athletes. A little bit about me. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on it. If you want detail, you've got something that looks like this in your packet. It gives a little bit of my history. There's really a few things I do want you to know that I want to talk about. One is, by training, I'm a clinical psychologist and a performance psychologist, which is a unique blend, sports psychology with performance psychology. I was a school psychologist at one time and worked in the North Olmsted Public Schools, Shaker Public Schools. I've done a lot of consulting with different schools, private schools, city schools, you name it. Clinically, I have two offices, one in Cleveland, right on the Rocky River, Cleveland border, and I have another office conveniently located about 5 minutes from here in Beechwood. And I do your regular, stuff that you think about what a psychologist does, clinical psychology. Finally, I do sports psychology work, performance psychology, and I work with a number of different, this is the main baseball program I work with, although there are other programs in the area that I've worked with. Also have done some consulting with some college teams, done a number of college presentations around the country, and some high school programs around the country. I've done stuff in Phoenix, Chicago, New York. I'm going to be in Birmingham, Alabama a little bit later this fall doing some things down there. So that's kind of a little bit about what I do. I work with teams and organizations, but then individual athletes. Okay, so that's a little bit about me. If you want to know a little bit more about me, it's in the stuff that you have. Oh, I should also mention I've worked with the Notre Dame Cathedral Latin baseball program for a long time, 22 years. And then where I met Josh was actually with St. Ignatius when we were over there, and a couple of years over there, a couple of state championship runs, which was nice. So that's a little bit about my background. I also want you to know this isn't all about, somebody, well, what does a psychologist know about baseball? Well, I've been coaching baseball. I shouldn't tell you this. Just don't do the math with it, okay, please. But I've been coaching baseball since 1969. And there are some of the parents here that I coached back in the day, some of the coaches that I coached. But had my first team when I was a senior in high school. So I've been doing this for a long time. Had a few summer state championship runs when I had a 16-year-old team back in the day. Won 3 consecutive state championships. So the reason I'm telling you that is because I don't want you thinking this is all out of the book and all about psychology. I have a baseball background. I continue to do instruction, individualized instruction, mainly on weekends because I'm just too busy during the weekdays to do that kind of thing. But those are some of the things that I do. What is sports psychology? And as I mentioned, maybe the best place to start is to say what it is not. Sports psychology is not about dealing with athletes with problems. I mean, that is a very small section of it, but it's more about teaching kids the correct approach, mental approach, which I think is what the Force and good coaches are doing anyhow. But when you have someone like myself, it kind of brings across the point in a different kind of a way. Okay? Most college athletic programs have sports psychologists working with their teams to a varying degrees. The Olympic team, the military, I don't know if you know this, but special ops forces like the Navy SEALs, the Army Rangers, and the more clandestine things like you see in the movies, they're all trained by sports psychology people with a military background. In those situations, one of the things we're teaching is focus and concentration and being in the moment, being very present. In a baseball field, if you don't do that, you lose. In the battlefield, you lose your life. And so, believe it or not, the head of training for the Army Rangers and the head of training for the Navy SEALs are sports psych people. Both have a military. I'm not trying to equate myself with them at all. Believe me, but they came out, they graduated from West Point, they graduated from Annapolis, they trained as psychologists and now are doing things because, again, those guys don't stay in the moment. Those guys aren't properly focused. They lose their life, okay? So that's a little bit about what sports psychology does. A lot of it is, again, training. If you really boil it down, what we're trying to get kids to do is to be in the moment, to be right here, right now, very focused on what they're doing. Okay, not wandering minds. We want them to be there focused on what's going on in the game, not what's going on inside of them. There's a lot going on inside of you when you're playing a game. I really believe that what separates out people that make it to the top as opposed to kids that don't make it that high is what's going on inside of you, and the ability to not pay as much attention to what's going on inside of you. You're hurting. You don't want to, you've got a little bit of pain. You don't want to be focused on that when you're competing. On a battlefield, you might be hungry, you might be scared. You can't focus on that when you're out in the battlefield. You've got to be focused on what's going on. Same thing in a game. Consequences are a little bit different, but the idea is the same. You've got to be focused. If you're going to be at your competitive best, you can't be inside yourself, getting too caught up in your thoughts, your feelings, your, whatever it is, your anger, your aggravation. And we're trying to teach them how to do that, and there's a number of different ways, okay? So I want to are there any questions so far? There's going to be different breaks tonight, and then I'm going to, where I'll allow you to ask some questions so we can keep the program moving. Any questions so far about what about what sports psychology is or about my background? Either I'm being very clear or very boring. Don't answer that question. I was just throwing that up. Okay. My role here at the Force, there's a kid component to this, okay? And I want to go over that first. And the kid component, which you see up in front of you, is, again, these are the areas of mental approach focus that I'm working with the kids on. And by the way, you guys too. I think you can use these same things as a sort of a guide to what I'm going to be doing. First thing we're going to be doing, and that's later in October, is goal setting, action planning, and practice approach and effectiveness. There should be a period in there. I got to correct that. But practice, approach, and effectiveness. And the goal setting we're going to be doing, each kid is going to be writing their own specific goals. There are three kinds of goals. There's outcome goals, performance goals, and process goals. Okay, they're going to be doing all three. They're going to have a very, 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 if they've done it correctly and really put in the time, very nice, concisely written plan for themselves. And yes, even the younger kids are going to be able to do that, which you're principally involved with. Practice approach and effectiveness, we're going to be talking to them about how to make the best of the practice that they're doing, okay? Things that they could do at home to reinforce what they're learning, the right questions to ask. Elite athletes practice differently than others. In fact, they've even given it a name. It's called deliberate practice. It's a very focused, intense kind of a practice, especially when you're talking about individualized skills and practicing those and getting proficient at those skills, okay? We want the kids to understand that and how to interact with that. So they're going to be getting a little bit of that. Focus, that's very important. Obviously, they have to be able to concentrate and focus. Concentrate and focus on the right thing. Many times they're focused on the wrong thing. They're focused on, why did the coach bat me ninth? That's not within their circle of influence. They're focused on the strikeout that they had for the next 8 innings. They're focused on the error that they made. Wrong focus. Okay, so we want to teach them how to stay in the moment, present in the game. We're going to talk a little bit later about what you can do to influence that, because you play a prominent role in teaching that by modeling the correct things to do so that you're not becoming a distraction, so they're not thinking about the wrong thing. The last thing they want to be thinking in the middle of the game is dad or mom pacing up and down with a disgusted look on their face. Okay, that's a distraction. Okay, so we're going to be talking about that. Mental toughness, we're going to be talking about that. It's related to focus. If you can stay in the moment and not get caught up in your pain and not get all caught up in your frustration and not get caught up in what mom and dad are doing, you're going to be mentally tough. You're going to be able to handle situations. We're going to be talking more about mental toughness a little bit later and define it. Leadership and self-management. I believe that leadership starts with yourself. Okay? Leadership starts with how you conduct yourself. If you can't conduct yourself the right way, why would you can't follow your own leader, you can't follow the lead of the team, how are you a leader to everybody else? So it starts with you conducting yourself the right way. In the Navy, they have a saying that some midshipmen told me about a long time ago. They learn followership. That's the first thing you learn in leadership training at any of the service academies, followership. Following the guidelines set down by the team, following the guidelines set down by the organization, following what you set down for yourself with your goals. In the Navy, they say if you can't follow, you can't lead. If you're out there doing your own thing, ignoring the expectations of your coach, of your teammates, of your organization, you're not leading. You're doing your own thing. So we're going to be talking about that, setting a good example. And I believe that with kids, that's where it starts. I don't really expect them to lead in a more sophisticated kind of way, the way an adult would. But it starts with doing the right thing as defined by the values of the team, the goals of the team, their own goals, and doing those things. If you set a good example, people will respect you and they'll follow your lead. So we're going to be talking about that. Being a good teammate, which I think is connected up with that. A lot of kids come out very selfish. It's all about them. It's all about what's in their best interest. That's not a good teammate. We're talking about that your team comes first, not you. And in setting that one, what goes into being a good teammate? They're going to be writing goals regarding, one of the goals they're going to have to write. Two of the goals they're going to be writing about is one is about being a good teammate, and another one is about some school-related goal. Because one of the things we like to teach, and I like to teach, is balance. Chances are you're going to learn a little bit later. Most of your kids, only about 6% of high school athletes ever play sports in college. 94% of high school athletes, their career is going to end the day they graduate. So you've got a whole life in front of you without Force baseball, without the other athletics. So you need to be balanced, not put all your eggs in one basket. So we're going to be talking about that. How am I going to do all that stuff? Well, there's different ways, different methods that I'll be interacting with your kids. First, we're going to have, I'm going to be meeting with them in a group. In a little bit, I'll be meeting with them in a group to do the goal setting. Periodically through the year, I'll be meeting with them at different points to go into different areas of focus. I'll also be at Academy. I'm going to be set up as a station. I'll be at each side of town about once a week, okay? I'm sorry, once a month on each side of town, 2 times a month, I think, right? Team meetings, a lot of that will depend on the coaches and how involved they want. Some of the teams have me very involved. I was at a bunch of their games. Other coaches, not as much, but I will be probably meeting with every team at least once or twice. And finally, there is individual consultation that is available to you. I do a lot of instruction, hitting, pitching, where I weave in the mental part. It's what I think a good hitting coach does anyhow, but I have a little bit more of a knowledge of that. So that gets sort of blended in with what I'm doing. If anybody is interested in that, you can let me know. That's the number 1 and number 2 is what I do as part of the program. Number 3 would be an additional cost, so you just understand that part, okay? So any questions? Second component is with the coaches. And that is, I'm around, I'm there. A lot of coaches call me with different things that come up during the season, a disciplinary problem, some attitudinal thing that I might help them with. Also, we have coach meetings. We've got one coming up a week from Saturday. So we talk about different things there. And that's really up to the coaches. The consultation part is up to the coaches whether they want to contact me or not. We have the parent component. If you haven't figured it out yet, this is part of the parent component, the orientation. We will be meeting later in the year. We're not ready for that yet. And that's okay. Later in the year, we'll be getting another meeting kind of as a prep for this, that's okay, as a prep for the school year. For the season, conduct. We're going to actually have the kids here for that meeting. It's parents and kids together, because I want you to hear directly from your kids what they think of how parents behave they say it a lot better than we do. And they're pretty blunt about it, so we've done that for a couple of years. I'm also there's also going to be, we're doing a college recruiting, Coach Bieneman and I are doing a college recruitment seminar, which is coming up. The East Side one is October the 10th, which will be here. October the 12th, it's going to be on the West Side, at our West Side location. That was a popular one, something that we started last year. I'm also available if you have any questions about anything, you can call and ask, okay? Any questions so far? Boy, it must be thorough. Okay. Okay. The main part of our presentation, this is the part where I talk a little bit about what I'd like you to take away. And boys will be men, girls will be women. I believe, as I tell most parents, the primary goal of parenting a child is to raise an independent, functioning adult. It's not to be their baseball coach, their sports chauffeur, their sports agent, their fan club on the sidelines. It's to raise an independent, functioning adult. And if you're successful, that's what you end up with. No laughter? Oh, okay. So that's what you're trying to do as a parent, okay? And I use that starting as a base, because I think and the research bears this out. Research bears out a lot of the readings that I've seen, my own observations over the last 40 years. Again, I've been coaching since 1969. I've seen an evolution in changes in parenting behavior and how it's affected kids, okay? And the research bears out my observation. My observations are kids are not growing up as quickly. They're not taking responsibility. They're not becoming independent, largely because of how they're being raised. It's not solely the parents, it's also how we do things culturally, but a lot has to do with parents. I'll give you an example. When I started coaching, my first team were 9-year-olds, okay? And of course, when I was coaching back then, we didn't have email, we didn't have the internet, we didn't even have voicemails, okay? So, this is 9-year-olds. I never talked to the parents. It wasn't expected. We handed the kids a schedule, and they followed it. I'm sure they took it home. I'm sure it got stuck on the refrigerator with a magnet. Did they have magnets back then? I don't know. But somehow it got on the refrigerator, and kids followed the schedule. If I called a practice, we didn't send out, an email. We told the kids, we're going to have a practice here Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, be here. They made it somehow. That would never happen now, okay? That would never happen now. Used to be, kids would ask me to come to a sporting event. Could you come to my game? I'd say, sure. When are you playing? The kid would either tell me, or they'd say, let me check my schedule, I'll call you later. What do you think they say now? And this is 15 and 16-year-olds. What do you think they tell me now? I don't know, I don't keep track of me. Ask my mother. You're 16 years old and you want me to ask your mother when your game is being played. I'm not doing that, okay? You tell me when you're playing. That's why when I set up my instruction with kids, I like to do it through the kid, because they're capable of more than what I think a lot of us are, how we're handling things. Well, he wouldn't be able to track his own schedule. Well, maybe that's because we're not teaching them how to track their own schedule. Some of it's not intentional, I get it. It's because of the internet and it's easy and you post it online. But a lot of the emails are going to parents, not the kids. The communication is going to parents. Kids aren't learning how to do some of these things. So anyway, but I'll get into that more a little bit later. So how am I going to go about doing that? Okay, you can flip this screen. Basically what I believe, what I'm trying to do, as I mentioned earlier, is I'm trying to develop kids' mental toughness. This is a definition of mental toughness. There's a number of different definitions that you see in the professional literature. It's a mental toughness, by the way, isn't just a term that you flip out. It's a researchable term. There's been a lot of research done. This is the definition I like. Mental toughness is the ability to consistently perform toward the upper range of your talent, skill, and ability, regardless of the specific circumstances of the situation. So you're going to play your best. You're going to be playing at that Corey Kluber level of play, irrespective of where you're batting in the batting order, what position you're playing, how many innings you're playing. Whenever you're out there, you're going to do your best, okay? Without getting caught up in frustration, with not getting caught up in how dad is sitting there screaming about the bad umpiring call, mom ringing the cowbell. I'm not going to get caught up in all that, okay? I'm going to focus on the game. I'm not going to sit there and whine about field conditions, whine about the position, whine about my playing time. I'm going to go out there and play as hard as I can, okay? So that's what we're going to be doing on the mental toughness side of things. And I try to instill that in everything that I teach them, okay? So we're trying to develop that. It's necessary. It's not just about baseball, it's about everything that they do, okay? Not getting caught up in circumstantial stuff that you don't have any control of. We're trying to teach them to control the controllables. Your attitude, your concentration, your effort, that's all you control. That's what we're going to focus on. You can flip the screen. Mental toughness is also, not that this is the main thing, because it really isn't, but I do like to give a reality check. I mentioned before that only 4 to 6% of high school athletes go on to play college sports of any kind at any level. 6.9% of high school baseball players go on to play at college at the Division I, II, or III levels of play combined. That's according to NCAA data. Why am I bringing this up now? Because I believe that a big part of why kids don't advance isn't because of their athletic ability. It's because of their approach and their attitude and how they do things. They're not mentally tough. And there's a word for that. Does anybody know? There's a code word in sports for somebody who's not mentally tough. Does anybody know what that word is? Coaches talk about, he's soft. Very soft. Strikes out, goes to the bench, sits with his head down for the next 6 innings. Makes an error, out there crying, pouting, doesn't like his place in the batting order. That's not going to cut it. And that's what those coaches are looking for. It doesn't take a college coach or a pro scout long to figure out a kid's skills or their running speed or how fast they throw a ball. Okay, that's a pretty quick thing. Okay, hopefully you're running the 60-yard dash in under 7 seconds. You know, the radar gun, you just pull your finger, that's how long it takes to figure that out. They can look at the tape. What they don't know, and I told the kids this, what you're like inside, what's your approach, how you handle things. So we want them to teach them the right approach and how to handle things. We need your assistance with that, okay? You need to model the right thing. You know, there's a bad umpiring call, it's going to happen. You're running up and down, ranting and raving. Is that what you want your kid doing, or would you rather have him focused on the game? You're modeling the wrong thing. And by the way, I know college coaches watch parent behavior at high school games, because if they see a parent acting that, they know pretty well that the kid probably doesn't have a real good approach either. And one of the things that college coaches are assessing is you and what you're like. They're also, a common thing I hear from college coaches is that, you know, parents do too much for kids, which we're going to be getting back into in a little bit later. And here's one example. A lot of college coaches say kids have not learned how to sit on the bench. They don't know how to sit on the bench. And they're going to be sitting in college ball because they're going to be carrying, you know, there's going to be 18, 19, 20 guys sitting on the bench. They're not all going to play at the same time. I went to military school. And my first year, I played in their summer league team. I was on the team. I didn't play a single inning of a single game. Today, if that happened, the parents would be calling the FBI, there'd be a lawsuit, there'd be, okay, if you missed one inning, they'd be calling the coach, what's going on? How come Jimmy didn't play today? But I remember sitting, and there are reasons why I didn't play, and not a lot, some of it didn't have anything to do with my abilities. I won't even get into that. But all I remember is how my dad handled that. I was at boarding school. And so my dad would call, how'd the team do? That was the first one. Great, we won, we lost, we did this, we did that. And then he said, well, you know, did you play? No. I said, okay. You working hard? I think so. You being a good teammate? I guess, I think. You helping? Yep, that was it. No whining, no crying, no nothing. And was I frustrated not playing? Yeah. But if my dad had been carrying on and getting enraged like some parents, they would have taken a bad situation and made it 100 times worse. By the time I was a senior, I was captain and their #1 pitcher. It must not have been very good if I was the number, but that's another story. But, you know, I lived through that, and that's the most important lesson I learned from that. That was the most important lesson I learned from that experience. Well, there were 2 lessons. 1, not to get caught up in that kind of thing. And 2, that if I ever coached, I would never, ever have a kid sit that long. Okay, that was wrong, clearly. But my dad didn't take that approach, and I'm thankful that he didn't. That's maybe one of the most important things I learned. So how do we instill mental toughness? How do we as a group? And it's not just you guys, it's not just the kids, but it's the coaches, it's the sports, it's everybody. So if you flip the screen here, lesson number 1, remember it's their game, not yours. Has anybody ever heard of the Matheny Manifesto? Anybody hear about that? Michael Matheny, the coach of the manager of the St. Louis Cardinals. You've got it. You don't have the cover page, but it's that typewritten. Read this, because this is a letter. Before he became manager of the Cardinals, he managed the youth baseball team, and he set down some things that he wanted, how he was going to run the team and how he wanted the parents to behave. I wrote this, I put this thing together long before I knew about it, but I'm saying the same thing. It's their game, not yours, okay? And what he talked about that is, he says, this is for them, it's not for the parents. And what I've seen, one part of when you used to go to a game, and it's changed slowly over the years, it was about the kids. It was about the kids. It was the kids' game. The parents stood back, let the kids go play. Now, all kinds of things. And parents used to drop their kids off at practice. We never had a parent at a practice back in the day. When I played, when I coached, up until maybe, now we have, you know, and I get it, maybe you've driven a long way and you don't want to drive all the way. You don't, it's winter, I understand. However, you don't have to be lurking around, staring, looking at your kid, signaling them in the middle of practice. Let them be. Let them be. Let them have their own game, okay? You drop them off on what Matheny says in his letter, and he reinforces in a book. By the way, this letter he gave to the parents, and then somebody put it online and it went viral, okay? Great things. There's a couple of religious things in here, which is not the reason why I put this together and why I have you look at. So don't, if you're into that, that's fine, but that's not the reason. I'm not trying to push any kind of religious belief. That's up to you. But he is very values-based and talks about some things about how he wanted parents to conduct themselves. The other thing that I've seen is parents turning this into their social event. Okay, their social life is revolving around this thing, okay? And there's some problems with that. It's the kids' event. It's not time for parents to come, and I've seen things, drinking at games, drinking alcoholic beverages at games, which is wrong, wrong, wrong. A lot of parents do that now. There's no separation. It's become a party atmosphere. You know, the most important thing is, you know, the team dinner after the game, or the party you're having, or the potluck you're doing after the game. Okay, that's a nice thing to do, but remember, it's the kids' game, okay? You also want them to just, you know, let them play. You don't need to be coaching them during the game. Back up. There's plenty of things you can be doing at home to help them out. Give them repetitions, hit them ground balls, pitch batting practice to them. If they want to get lessons, you can do this. All kinds of ways you can be supportive. But when you're making it more about you than them, you're taking away from it, okay? When you create a fuss at the games, you're distracting them. I had one of my former players who ended up in the major leagues. We had a real good heart-to-heart one day about, I said, tell me about your youth days when you played for me. You played for me for about 6 years. I said, what are some of the things you remember? He kind of surprised me. He says, you know, so what I really liked is the way you ran your trips when we went on a weekend trip. You had the players room together. And I used to try to run my trips like a college trip, because I coached college, I didn't mention that, but I coached college baseball, Division I baseball. And I decided I was going to try to run my trips for 12, starting with 12, like a college trip. So the kids roomed together. They were given a schedule they had to follow. Here's one time I want you downstairs. I wanted, and I separated them. What he said to me is, he says, on those trips and at our practice and our games, I felt like I was really on my own. We felt great being on those trips. I felt like we were adults. He said, we really weren't on our own. There were adults around, but you let us manage. And he said that was an important lesson. That was the thing that was the best thing about. He didn't say anything about the games, the champions, the this, the that, the other. It was that. And he felt that made a big contribution to his success in college, the minor leagues, and then on into the major leagues. So remember, it's their game, okay? And you want to kind of back away. When you drop your kid off, they belong to the coach. Obviously, if something happens, they get hurt, something like that, will get you involved. But otherwise, back away. Okay, next one. Okay, letting them do things for themselves. And a lot of this has to do with becoming independent. Okay? College coaches talk about this all the time. Michael Matheny talks about this all. Parents are doing too much. The kids are becoming very passive. I don't know when my game is. My mom tells me when the game is, and then I go put my, they're not responsible for many of them, for putting their equipment bag together, for their beverages. One of the things that Michael Matheny talks in the manifesto, he says, I don't want you coming over the bench and asking little Roger if he needs a drink and holding up a Gatorade. Let them be responsible for their drinks, okay? Let them take charge whenever you can, okay? So let them track their schedule. If they miss a game because they forgot their glove, I had a kid who was doing some hitting with him, and he comes in with his sandals. Can't practice today, sorry, send him home. Okay, I'll run home and get the, no. He'll learn it now, it won't happen again. If you keep doing it for them, they're never going to remember. Let them communicate. If they're having a problem, don't you run in and communicate. Let them do that. Teach them. It's an opportunity to teach them how to talk to their teammates, to their coach, to other adults. You're back there, if things get difficult, you can be, but don't just pick up the phone, okay? How come Jimmy only played 8 1/3 innings today? What happened to the other 2/3? What's going on? How come he's not at shortstop? No, okay? Yeah, you might win a battle right then and there, you might get them more playing. What are you teaching them in the long run? To be soft. To be entitled, to think that their problems are going to be solved by somebody outside of themselves. That's not going to work in college. A parent calls a college coach, guess what? You're sitting for the next week. Or you may be off the team completely. And some high schools are that way. So let them do things for themselves. It's a learning opportunity. Okay? It's a learning opportunity. Don't be so fast to want to run in and solve everything for them. Next slide. You're their parents, and you love your kids very much, and it can kill you when they're standing out there and things aren't going their way. And so it's very well intended where you want to go in and try to fix it by calling the coach or doing this or doing that. That's not going to cut it either. Oh, you might get it fixed, you might fix things up, but what are they learning in the long run? What do I mean by being comfortable? That's a common phrase in sports, because when you're playing at the professional level, you're going to get anxious. Trust me. When you're batting in front of 54,000 people with a guy throwing what amounts to a rock with red stitches at your head at 90 miles an hour, you're going to be anxious. You got to learn how to deal with that. You strike out in front of 55,000 people, you're the one that's got to live with that. Ultimately, you're alone out there. You can't always make it right, okay? And they need to learn how to do that. So what do you do to make that happen? Well, they strike out and they're sitting there pouting for 3 innings. Okay, do you call the coach? Do you try to, what are you going to do with that? Or do you tell them you need to sit up straight, you need to, come on, get your head up? Or do you call the coach? He's not playing the position, didn't play today. You're going to call the coach and complain, or are you going to teach your kid how to deal with not playing? Oh, I know you've invested a lot of money, blah, 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 blah. My kid is the next A-Rod, my kid is the next Francis. Yeah. Not if you're going to do that stuff. It's not going to happen, okay? And I have to tell you that the kids that I know that were the most successful really did learn how to deal with that. I'm telling you that the kids I've seen that made it the farthest didn't get caught up in that stuff. They're like ice water. They just moved on. They didn't get caught up. When you're, and one of the ways you want to do this is by modeling the right thing. You get a bad umpiring call, horrible call, I've seen it, but it's going to happen. Yes, you're going to get bad umpiring. Yes, the umpire, guaranteed you're going to get bad umpires, okay? You didn't know that before? So you're going to get a bad call. Your kid can't sit there whining, sitting on the bench, whining about it because they're so aggravated, that's all they know how to do. They're so uncomfortable, they've just got to whine and complain and sulk. And there's mom and dad on the sideline doing the same thing, complaining and mouthing and yelling and screaming. Is that what you want your kid doing? They're not moving on. They got to play the game. So when you model the right behavior, yeah, we didn't like the call either, but you know what? Let's focus on the game. You don't control the umpiring decisions. You don't control, well, you indirectly control coaching decisions. If you play well, you're going to probably play more. If you have a good attitude, you're going to play more. So instead of whining about all these things, have you ever heard the phrase control the controllables? It's a common phrase in sport. Has anybody heard that? Control the controllables? Anybody? What do you control in your life? I'm pointing at you. Oh, if I put you on the spot, what do you control? Do you
just got back in, so I don't know. Just
nice try. What do you control? Now, right now, are you you're not comfortable right now, are you?
oh.
Does that mean you can't answer that question? You're a little nervous because does that mean you can't answer the question? Yes, you can, even though you're a little nervous right now. So think about, do you control the umpires?
No.
The coaching decisions?
No.
Field conditions?
No.
Can you control your attitude?
Yes.
Can you control your concentration?
Yeah.
Can you control your effort?
Yeah.
Can you control your behavior?
Yeah.
That's what you focus on. See, you answered the question correctly. Congratulations. You did it with a smile, even though you were nervous. That's what we're talking about. He just told me a whole lot about himself. I'm going to be doing a lot of that, putting kids on the spot a little bit, because in baseball, you're going to get put on the spot. And you know, adults aren't going to be there to answer for you. You know, what's your name? I'm sorry.
Jacob.
What is it?
Jacob.
Jacob. Nice to meet you, Jacob. You showed a very good side of yourself. I learned a lot about you tonight. Good things. Good job, okay? You're going to get put on the spot in baseball and in life, so we want them to be able, one of the lessons they're going to learn, you're going to be uncomfortable sometimes. That doesn't mean you can't perform. I had a member of the Cleveland Orchestra speak to the kids one year, one of the world's greatest violinists. And one of the kids wanted to know, do you ever get nervous before a performance? And what do you think his answer was? I get nervous before every performance. He goes, well, how do you play? He says, it's part of it. I've accepted it. I'm uncomfortable. So what? Go play. That's what they've got to learn how to do. We need your assistance. You're ranting and raving. I don't think that's what you want your kid to be doing. Or whining, because that's not going to get the game won. Okay. Control the controllables. You can flip the... I mentioned earlier that kids are not growing up as quickly as they could. There was a recent article, it was just published in Child Development, which is an esteemed research journal, and they studied kids longitudinally from the 1970s all the way through the present. I got them beat out because I started in 1969, but anyway. But what the studies showed were that kids are not growing up as quickly, and they used a number of different measures on that. But right now, 25-year-olds act, from about 30 years ago, they acted the way 18-year-olds did 30 years ago. 18-year-olds are acting about like 14 and 15-year-olds, and so on and so forth, all the way down. A lot of it is because we're not allowing them the opportunities to grow as quickly. I put this in here because there was a controversy. Does anybody remember this controversy, James Harrison going on a rant because they gave his kids participation trophies and he sent them back to the coach? You can read that. It was in the press. And then Jim Vance, who's a District of Columbia news anchor, had some things to say. If you can read the bottom, creating entitlement-minded winners since, what is it? Since the 1980s. You know, one of the things, you know, it's kind of coupled with what I was talking before. You got to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. It's not our job to make our kids feel good all the time. That's not what we're here for. You can't get caught up in, you're not going to feel good sometimes. You got to get used to that. Artificially pumping up with things like this isn't going to do it. I get it, hug after the game, that's fine, not in the middle of the game, please. After the game, some words of encouragement, that's fine, okay? But to artificially pump them up and to think that you're going to be 100% confident, you're not. And really, the mark of success is, how do you do when you're not feeling really motivated? How do you feel when how are you doing when you're in the middle of a slump? Can you sustain your effort? Can you sustain your attitude? Can you sustain your focus? That's what's going to make you successful, because there is going to be a slump. There are going to be times you're on the bench. There's going to be times when you strike out. You've got to be able to do that. So at the end of the day, if you could flip the slide. This is a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer this. I sort of gave it before, but I'm saying again. Your child is sitting on the bench pouting because he or she is not playing. Do you, 1, call the coach to discuss your child's playing time, or 2, teach your child not to pout? How will your decision, and this is a question you want to ask yourself, everything we do, every day, every little move, either contributes to a kid being mentally tough, self-sufficient, responsible, or we teach them to be soft and passive, irresponsible, and very dependent. Every decision you make, you got to ask yourself this question: how will your decision impact the development of your child's ability to achieve independence, mental toughness, and resilience? They can either stand tall like Corey Kluber or Mariano Rivera, or any number of name your hero on a baseball field, the military, or wherever it is, or they can end up looking like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. And that's your choice, what kind of child you want to have at the end of the day when they reach adulthood. So, with 5 minutes to spare, are there any questions about anything? Oh, question, finally, I love questions. Yes, sir.
So you actually spoke and were friends with my son, Kendall, bless him.
Oh, sure, okay.
Miami, and so I've listened to you speak before. So you reference the old school way of doing things. So if you look at today, you've got kids that are multiple sports, trying to do all these sports in the demand. And then the reality is, like, when you go to college, it's going to be very tough for you to choose a tough major go to a Division I school and sustain that? How do you mentally prepare both the kids and the parents? Because everyone's putting a ton of time into their kids' sports today. So any thoughts?
So how do you prepare them for the college sports experience?
Well, the reality that most of these kids, or even if they have the talent, they're not going to be able to go to college, choose a tough major, and be committed to, especially a Division I.
So you're talking kind of balancing everything. How do you balance?
But the harsh reality of that.
Yeah, it is a harsh reality, and really a lot of kids fail. You know, they might get into a college program, but they fail. They can't handle, the coaches in college aren't going to be the nice, silk-gloved, dad kind of a coach that your kids grew up with. And so they're going to be a little tougher. The demand of college is very difficult. Playing college sports is about a 5-6 hour a day commitment. You've got to learn how to schedule yourself. You've got to learn how to manage it. So I think the thing to do is, starting now, your kids are very young. This is the younger parents, right? The younger kids, I should say. You start now. All the things I talked about are preparation for that. You've got to balance. This isn't all about your sport. Professional athletes and Olympic athletes talk about the same thing. They talk about the importance of balance, being able to have your family, do your studying, prepare for your sport. You've got to be super organized. You can teach your kids how to be organized. And you organizing them, that's not organization. So I would say, they've got to learn how to do that. They've got to learn that they may be, the part about they may be sitting and not, but they got to prepare for that. They've always been the star shortstop on their team all the way from being T-ball all the way through high school. All of a sudden, you got guys that are bigger, faster, more. You can do it, but you're going to be facing competition maybe, so there's that part. But my answer to that is that you need to teach them how to be independent. All the things we talked about is really, this presentation hits right there.
Sure.
Okay? And being focused on the right things. By the way, coaches have a way, college coaches have a way. I'll give you a quick example. Did I answer your question?
You did.
Don't you hate it when somebody answers? They talk for 10 minutes, they didn't answer the question. So coaches have their way of figuring out what kind of kid they're getting. The recruiter, I don't think he's there anymore, but the guy that used to recruit for the Notre Dame football team, he would meet with, he wanted to see what the kids were like, what their parents were like. And he had an expression, he had the we families. Does anybody know what the we families are? Well, and I'm sure Coach Josh and Kevin have experienced, I know I've experienced this. The kids trying out for the team, you say, where did you play last year? And the dad, we played for the Force. We played for Ohio Elite. Notre Dame called the Weave. That was a red flag. Why?
Because they're not allowing the kid to be an independent, participating in the sport.
Right. They're not independent. Dad's answering for them. It's like we're joined at the hip or something. Red flag. Now that may or may not be they're reading into that, but recruiters have a lot of experience. They read families very, very well. I've had people say, we played for the Force, and I will look at the Denzel. Really, in what position did you play? And they kind of get it. I'm pretty straightforward. I don't mince words. I'm respectful, but that's got to be cut short. So, yeah.
So as a former college coach, my oldest son plays AAA hockey Tier 1 and also plays baseball, both high school and travel. In the past, they've said at a certain age you should specialize, so to speak, like choose a sport. But then we've been reading lately that coaches are actually really like athletes that play multiple sports, or at least two. What's your feeling on that?
Well, first off, specialization that's the kid's decision, not mom and dad's decision. That's number one. Remember, it's their game, not yours. Most of the research shows that kids are not really truly ready to commit to a sport until the age 15, 16, usually 14 at the earliest. The problem is that the way high school athletics are run now, and even summer athletics, it's very difficult to play more than one sport because all these coaches have turned their programs into year-round training programs. Football, soccer, hockey are very notorious, and I ran the Shaker hockey program for a few years. It's the biggest mistake I ever made, but that's another story. Not because of Shaker, just because directing a program like that, and I'm glad it's you and not me. But I think when the kid's ready to decide to commit, and yes, college coaches love multi-sport athletes because they're learning to compete. And that's what they want. So that's usually a plus. You start getting recruited. We had a kid this year from the Force who had been playing football. Of course, he was mandated by his college baseball. They didn't want him playing to avoid injury. But there is a time where time to focus on this over here. Okay? But it's up to your son, not mom and dad or the coaches. It's got to come from them.
We were just trying to take a more guiding approach.
Right.
At this point, of course, he wants to do it all, and we're okay with that. But I just didn't know if there was a thought process.
You take them
from a college perspective.
Yeah, from the college, they like kids that play, but there is when a kid is really wanting to dedicate, not because of pressure from the coach, because they really love it and that's what they want to do. And you take them through that. You listen, you reflect, And anybody who thinks that I had a parent that came in, the presenting problem is they're very concerned. They had a 10-year-old son, and he hadn't chosen a sport to specialize in, and they thought that was a problem. And my response was, yes, you're right, it is a big problem, but I won't need your son here to deal with it. I need the two of you here, because you've got a problem if you think a 10-year-old is ready to specialize. I hope that answers it. Time for one more question, then I've got round two of this. Yeah?
Question. How do you talk to your child about nepotism and coaches putting their kids, their own kids in? I mean, how do you learn for your kids to understand what happens?
It happens, and learn a lesson from it, and try not to make a big deal. If you can say, you can have your opinion. Everybody's got an opinion, and that's okay. But I think if you're ranting and raving, going on and on about it, you're making it worse. You're making it, when you're complaining and whining and talking, caring, you're making it worse for your son. So try to handle it matter-of-factly. Yeah, I know, I don't like it either, but this is what happens in life. It happens. It happens, and you just look. Let's focus on what you can say. We don't control that. Let's focus on our attitude, our concentration. Let's focus. We don't control that. Hey, it goes on. You don't just glibly say, "Oh, well, that's life," because they're not going to. But it's how I think you can model how to handle that. You can be honest. Yeah, I don't like it either. But you know what? This is what goes on. We have to live with this. So let's live with it. Let's do the best we can. Hey, it goes on in the White House. Okay? And I'm not talking just about this current administration. It happens in all administrations. So if you're thinking that was a hit at any one particular president, it wasn't. It's gone on all over the place.
Why did you try to refocus it, again, like you said, on him? Focus on yourself, on what other kids are doing. I said, you have to wait your time.
The common denominator, I've watched a lot of kids go on, a lot of kids I coach. I've had kids go on and play at University of Florida, LSU, Notre Dame, Ohio State, all over the place, okay? And the things that those kids that made it the furthest at the pro, they didn't get caught up in any of that. Yeah, they would see it. Here, I'm going to give you a quick story. They can wait, I don't care. Guy I was working with is a minor league ball player. And he had had a heck of a season. He was moved up to AAA. He was moving up, young guy. And I said, how are things going? And he said, well, you know, pretty well. You know, it's, you know, moved up because he was adjusting how your new teammates, new man. You know, you're moving along. He went from single A to double A, triple A in 1 year. Or no, he had moved to double A. I'm sorry. And he says, you like it? He says, yeah. He says, the manager's a little bit of a, I don't like the manager too much. I said, oh, really? Why is that? He said, he's a racist. Oh, really? How is that? He says, well, he favors all the Hispanic players. And the other guy's, and it's real obvious to everybody. And he you know, he's, you know, and I said, oh. And I said, well, wow. I said, yeah. He says, I don't like that. He came from a family that was really believed in treating people the right way, and he had a very good, you know, very good values regarding that. And I said, so I started trying. I said, well, God, that must be awful. He said, and he just put his hands up. He said, stop. I can't go there. I'm trying to get to the major leagues. They got it. They're going to hand me the ball every 4 days. I have to go out and pitch. I can't go there. And at first, like, I was much younger when this happened. I'm like, well, you brought it up. What are you telling me to stop for? And it wasn't until years later that I really understood. He was bringing it up. He had an opinion. He wanted to make me aware. But the way I was talking about it, he could feel himself starting to get caught up, and he said, stop, I can't go there. And he did make it to the top. And he didn't get caught up, and there were, I could tell you 10 other stories. You can't get caught up in that stuff, and it's no different than the nepotism thing.